when you're flying a plane and you get behind the power curve, you can be at full throttle, giving it everything you got, and you're actually losing altitude. You can even risk stalling out or crashing. I think the problem, our brain tells us to do the wrong thing. We're losing altitude, so we put the nose up and we put the throttle at full, but we've got so much drag that we're making ourselves more vulnerable, not less. That's exactly what it feels like. I'm at full throttle. I'm trying to point the nose up. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to add new markets. I'm trying to improve profitability. But how am I losing altitude?
Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today we have Liane Davey joining us. For the past 25 years, Liane has researched and advised teams on how to achieve high performance. Known as the Teamwork Doctor, she's worked with teams from the front lines to the boardroom across a variety of industries and around the globe from Boston to Bangkok. She's the author of several books, including The Good Fight, and her latest work is Thoughtload: Manage the Madness and Free Your Team to Do Great Work. Welcome to the show, Liane.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. Let's jump in. Please give our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story.
Okay, I would say, so I live in Toronto, born and raised in the suburbs of Toronto, and was always fascinated by factories and thought that I was going to grow up and work on industrial machines until I learned I wasn't really good at that stuff. Failed calculus in first year university, and then discovered the human machine, the cross-functional team, and have spent the rest of my career working on the machine of the knowledge economy, the cross-functional team, and helping people achieve amazing things together. Married to my business partner, my husband, Craig, and we have 2 grown girls. That's us.
Excellent. Now, I have to ask, and it's not that everybody in Canada is a Rush fan, but I am a really, really big Rush fan. And Geddy Lee and Alex are on tour again this summer.
They are.
So I'm just curious if what the buzz is in Toronto.
You know what? It's really funny, which is a bit of a Canadian thing, is that there are probably more and more diehard Rush fans outside of Canada than inside of Canada. So one of my other dear friends, Colin, is the biggest Rush fan I know, and he lives in the UK. He's not Canadian. So I'm not up on it, although I did hear Geddy Lee singing something on social media recently. So it's starting to enter the zeitgeist again, but
Yes.
I'm not up on it. I have to,
Yes.
I'm excited because I'm going the other way. I'm a Noah Kahn fan, a good Vermont boy, and he's coming soon. So I'm excited about that. So we'll trade all these wonderful, talented people.
All right. Well, I'm seeing them Rush
Wonderful.
in Chicago.
Oh, that'll be a good
summer.
night.
And so we digress, but it was very
in the best possible way.
for our listeners. You just have no idea how big a Rush fan I am. So
I love it.
I just had to ask the question.
Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely.
Liane, if you had to pick a key event in your life that just accelerated your career, what would that be?
Accelerated my career. So the key moment I already mentioned was failing calculus, which got me off the path. And I needed to take some courses the next year that didn't have math prerequisites while I retook that calculus. And I stumbled into organizational psychology and fell madly in love with the program within the first 2 weeks and have spent the rest of my career there. So that's what really changed my life. But in terms of really rocketing my career, I worked in a company. The first firm I worked in was a company called Watson Wyatt. It's gone on to have many acquisitions and changes in names since then. But it was a wonderful job and I learned lots of great things, but I realized, and I describe it as at some point I needed to be repotted if I was going to have my flowers bloom as much as they could. And I made a jump after about 6 years to a smaller firm, but a firm that was going to allow me to work more on business strategy issues and bring the people expertise into a business conversation. So I started at a firm called Knightsbridge in 2005, and that was probably where the trajectory of my career changed. I worked there 10 years before starting my own firm with my husband, but probably if you look at how steep the trajectory of my career was at any point, the big inflection point was that jump into a firm that was a little smaller, but moved to a more sophisticated and more business savvy kind of work.
Right. So let's start with your tagline. Why are you known as the quote unquote teamwork doctor? I'm really interested. Take us inside a recent success story where you took a team from dysfunctional to productive. And in your response, what are the necessary ingredients to success?
Yeah, I love it. I think the teamwork doctor came up because, they would always announce me when I'm giving a keynote as, Liane has a PhD in organizational psychology. And then they'd be like, ooh, she's a psychologist. Like, oh, and then they'd start making jokes about, ask me about my mother, or do you need me to lie down on the couch? And so an MC had a big event that I do. He's like, we need to tell them you're the teamwork doctor, so they get that you're not a clinical psychologist. So that's where it came from. And so I'm really privileged and fortunate to do amazing work. I'm thinking about a team in a cloud infrastructure company that I've been working with for a while. And, when I first met them, they were a bunch of ambitious, wonderful, interesting, smart people trying to be all things to all people. They had a business that was B2C, like a business where you could buy a piece of software and kind of put it on your credit card for $6 a month, all the way up to selling to the biggest enterprises. And, trying to be all of those things requires just too many things to pay attention to, too much to be good at. And what was happening was, because of the dilution of their attention, they weren't getting things done. They weren't getting ahead. And that meant just so many losses and so much evidence that they weren't winning and other guys were getting ahead, and just terrible. And that just drains your batteries really quickly. So the work has been to get them ruthlessly focused on the place where they really can win. They deserve to win. They're set up to win. Get them some of those small victories that allow them to feel a sense of momentum, to feel great about themselves, to feel a sense of accomplishment, and to teach them how to sprint and rest and not try and sprint a marathon, which I think a lot of companies are doing right now. So that kind of work, figuring out, we work at the intersection of strategy and executive team effectiveness, leadership effectiveness, and, sitting in that spot and helping people both create the right team dynamic to unlock the right strategy, and then to make sure that that team dynamic supports executing the strategy, which is easier said than done. That's the privilege of my lifetime, to do that work with companies in all different industries. And as you said in the introduction, from Boston to Bangkok.
Yeah, it's a tale as old as time, isn't it? You've got these great ideas. You think you have a product that can solve all sorts of business challenges. And so you position it to solve all these business challenges. But in the process, you're really setting yourself up for that dilution, and you just can't be all things to all people or all businesses or all challenges.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, as you're not hitting your revenue numbers, as you're not, you're getting more and more evidence that you're in trouble. The tendency is to cast a wider net, to be like, okay, well, maybe if we go after them and also add them. And of course, that dilution is going to send you the wrong direction. So I tell a story at the beginning of Thoughtload about an executive that chimed in response to this feeling with his experience as a pilot. He's a private pilot. And he said, this is like when you're flying a plane and you get behind the power curve. And when you're behind the power curve, you can be at full throttle, giving it everything you got, and you're actually losing altitude. You can even risk stalling out or crashing. And that's, I think, the problem. We have this, our brain tells us to do the wrong thing. We're losing altitude. So we put the nose up and we put the throttle at full, but we've got so much drag that we're making ourselves more vulnerable, not less. And when he told that story, it just like he rocked my world with that story. And what I realized is that so many leaders today, that's exactly what it feels like. I'm at full throttle. I'm trying to point the nose up. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to add new markets. I'm trying to improve profitability. But how am I losing altitude? So that's what I set out to solve.
Well, let's talk about one of those drags, which is internal conflict that really drags teams down. Engaging in constructive conflict is really easier said than done. I'd like to go to your book, The Good Fight, which the tagline is "Use productive conflict to get your team and organization back on track." If you met a random reader of that book on the street, what would you want their unaided recall of the experience to be?
Yeah. So one, that, you really helped me believe that some things are worth fighting for. That would come out first. Second, that I need to tip the balance to having way more tension, the kind of conflict that opens us up and helps us take in and optimize with diverse perspectives. And I need to have way less friction, the kind of conflict that wears us down. And the last thing would be, and that once I've embraced that I realize that it's much worse to be in conflict debt than to go through conflict and get to the other side of it. That's what I would love if they told me they took away from it.
Cool. So I found that constructive conflict, when you think about it and you say, okay, we need more tension in the organization, that it's episodic at best, that individuals and teams, that you have a little constructive conflict, everything's going well, but then we backslide into the comfort of conflict avoidance because we're wired that way, right? As
Yes.
human beings.
We are.
Run from the lion. So how can teams maintain the momentum and weave that constructive conflict, those muscles, into an organization's cultural norms?
Yeah, that's a big part of what The Good Fight is about. So there's 3 parts in the book, and it starts with the case for conflict, which is it's a big ask to get people to believe that they need more conflict. So that's the first section. The second section is the conflict code. How do I have that interaction in a way that's the most productive and healthy? But I come to the same conclusion as you, which is that episodic or event-based conflict is incredibly taxing on us, right? You have to steel yourself for it. It's very uncomfortable. It tends to leave strong emotional residue. And what we need is what I talk about in the third section of the book, which is the conflict habit. How do we make this not an event, but just a part of everyday life? And so the analogy I use is right now, conflict is a bit like root canal. And you need it, right? but it's not great. What we need is conflict to become like flossing. Right? It's like, oh, that's just something I do every day. And, nobody loves flossing, but, it's not that bad. And if I do it every day, I avoid the root canals. So that's a big part of it. So what do you have to do? So there's 3 pieces that I go through. One is doing a better job of setting expectations, because a huge amount of what causes unhealthy friction is that we never set expectations well in the first place. We weren't actually aligned. People spend a lot of energy and then disappoint us because it wasn't what we wanted. And that's very frustrating. So doing a better job of expectations. Secondly, really programming into people how the tensions that should exist in the team. If you're in sales, you better be in tension with operations or we're all in trouble, right? And if you're in marketing, you better be in tension with sales, et cetera, et cetera. So going through the effort to map out the constructive tensions that are there, and then using your meeting structures, your facilitation of a meeting, all of these things to ensure that you've got contributions from all of these different perspectives and the different tensions baked in. And then finally, learning techniques to just up the habit, the flossing habit of conflict, like just questioning evidence, challenging assumptions, throwing in a different stakeholder, a different perspective to just stress test something. So that whole section of the book is about how do we get away from conflict as an event, particularly an aversive event, and how do we turn it into a habit that we barely think of. It's just how we do things.
So I love the sales operations example and the natural tension that should exist. But what I've found is that the natural tension, which should be constructive, tends to quickly fall over into it's us and it's them, and they're not giving me what I need to be successful. So therefore, I'm in sales. I hate operations. I'm in operations. I hate sales.
Yeah.
How do you prevent it from tipping over into that us them that starts to tear a culture apart?
Yeah. So we never get out of us them as humans, because that's how we're wired, to see us and them. So what we have to do is sort of rise above it. And so we do an exercise, and I take everyone through the exercise in The Good Fight about how to get away from thinking of teamwork like rowing, which is we're all in the same boat, don't rock the boat, everybody pull in the same direction. And instead, I use the metaphor of imagine teamwork is like having a plastic tarp that you're trying to spread out over your tent to stay dry. There's, a rope on each corner of this tarp, and you're not pulling in the same direction at all. Sales is pulling in one direction, operations is pulling in another direction, and the tarp is never big enough. You never have enough resources. And the job is to make sure everybody sleeps dry. And so just that reframing that says, hey, sales, if you pull your rope as far as possible, just get this decision to go as far in your direction as possible, everybody's getting wet, because we'll probably have something that the customer loves, but it won't be at a price where we can make any money, or it'll be something that is incredibly inefficient for our factory to produce or whatever else. And ops, same thing. We could have an incredibly optimized, efficient supply chain of stuff nobody wants to buy because it's not, lying to the customers. So first of all, understanding that nobody's job is to be the best salesperson in the world. Nobody's job is to be the best operations person in the world. Everybody's job is to say, how can I optimize what sales contributes here in the context of what marketing and HR and operations are contributing? How can I make that dynamic based on which way the wind is blowing? Because we also have to move the tarp as the winds shift to stay dry. And remembering that all of our job is to sleep dry, whether that be our customers, our distributors, our employees, our shareholders. We all want to sleep dry tonight. So getting to, and then one other thing you realize as soon as I say that is there needs to be someone who owns that tarp. Somebody to say, you're pulling too hard. Somebody to say, we're missing a rope here.
Right.
We're missing a perspective. Somebody to say, the winds are shifting. And although that might have been the optimal place to make our decision previously, things are different and we need to move it. We need to take up the stakes and move the tarp again. So all of that depends on, the right leader who can facilitate what we would call a TARP process to get to the right answer. So as soon as you get out of the rowing metaphor, as soon as you stop measuring someone's success as, were we all pulling in the same direction, and start to say, did you contribute to making these resources go as far as possible, but never in a way that took it off of being in the right spot for our stakeholders and for what matters. So it's more of an optimization conversation.
Yeah.
So we don't need an us and them. We're all pulling on this tarp, all with the goal of sleeping dry.
That's a wonderful metaphor. We're going to take a really short commercial break, and we'll be right back with Liane Davey. Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Temte. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Temte on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Liane Davey talking about teamwork and constructive conflict. Liane, let's shift to your new book, Thoughtload. This word is going to be a new word for most listeners, and congratulations for dreaming up another word for the dictionary.
Yeah.
What does Thoughtload mean, and why should we care?
Yeah. So a few years ago, I started to realize from doing this work in real organizations that work isn't working. But everyone was pointing to workload as the source of the overwhelm and the burnout and the low ROI on our projects. And as I watched, I was like, people aren't actually getting that much work done. I don't think it's the work that's the issue. And one day on the stage giving a keynote in response to a question from the audience, I just said, it's not your workload, it's your thought load. And this word that I created just came out of my mouth and the room went silent. And the minute I said it, I knew, oh, this is important. I need to serve this idea. So thought load is the invisible tax on your performance and your presence that comes from a combination of three things: rising cognitive demands, just how much we have to pay attention to; increasing emotional burdens that come from our own and everybody else's emotional dysregulation these days; and then our declining energy reserves because we're exhausted and we're burned out. And these three things together create our thought load. And if you watch, the thing that will predict whether someone is productive, effective, innovative, collaborative, all those things, is their thought load more so than their workload. If you keep the thought load down, you can actually get a lot of work done. But when our brains have 20 tabs open at the same time and we're fretting and afraid of, what ball has dropped or what ball is going to drop, that's when we're in real trouble. So thought load, the invisible tax on your performance and your presence. And it's, as soon as I say it to people, they're like, yeah, everybody can relate.
Yeah, it was a tough lesson for me when I was sitting in the CEO chair, because as CEO, you want to get everything done all at once, and you think you've got these teams that are all working on the goals that you've all decided on, and it's really not the case. I had a real aha moment the first time I heard the phrase context switching. And this was in relation to our tech teams who were like, okay, you want me to work on this part of the tech stack today or this morning, and then you want me to do these 5 other things by the end of the day? I just can't switch between the two. So how does context switching relate to those key messages in Thoughtload, and how would you advise a leader to optimize that balancing act between reducing context switching and the competing tactical and strategic goals of the organization?
Yeah. So context switching contributes to the cognitive demands. That's the primary way it affects our thought load. And we know that as we do that, it also drains our energy more quickly. So that's the second piece of the puzzle. But what we forget is the emotional piece of it as well. So if that context switching is something that adds threat or a sense that we're not keeping up, or we're not good enough, or I don't understand this context, or I'm not as good in this context, that sort of thing, then then we've got the emotional triggering as well. So context switching is, our brains are just slow at it. So if we're going to do it, and of course we need to context switch at the very least between being a human at home, having breakfast in the morning, and, putting on our work hat and being a grown up. And then again, at the end of the day, like context switching, like Mr. Rogers would change his cardigan and his slippers. But if you think about it, we don't just do 2 context switches a day. We do whatever. Well, I can give you some scary stats. So the average employee is toggling between 1,200 different screens in one day. So with the number of programs and tools, we're using a CRM, we're using an ERP, we're using the Microsoft Office suite, 1,200 times that we are switching screens in a day. The physical switching cost is 2 seconds. The cognitive switching cost is much, much, much higher. But even at the 2 seconds, that's 3 hours a week that we're doing nothing but toggling between screens. So the human brain is not made to be creative, be productive in that sense. We need greater flow in order to get into our sort of optimal state. So how do we design work more effectively to allow people to get into flow more often for longer? And right now we're sitting at about 5 minutes between interruptions for the average employee. And 5 minutes, you're not getting any focus and flow happening. So we have to take it seriously, and we don't. We have just piled on the technology, piled on the notifications. We have allowed matrix organizations to run amok with the number of people and projects we're serving at any given time. And all of that means our thought load is unmanageable. And we're seeing the result. We're seeing the productivity costs. We're seeing the stress costs. We're seeing people who just aren't even present anymore because they're so tapped out by their thought load. So it's a huge issue that we have not, we really haven't tackled it. And AI, particularly agentic AI, is about to amplify that at a rate that none of us can quite appreciate yet. But while AI is, a boon to our workload, it may allow us to get a ton of work done. Early data is suggesting it's awful for amplifying thought load. And we haven't considered that. We haven't done anything about it. We're just about to let this run rampant in our organizations, and we're going to pay the price.
Yeah. The phrase technical debt is swimming around in the back of my mind right now. And so you've got artificial intelligence tools coming online, but organizations have not tackled their technical debt from several decades of their tech stack bolting on this piece and that piece. I remember back to my my customer service teams and technical support teams, and you talked about the number of windows, and I think back and I cringe at at what we were asking those wonderful people to do, because they'd have to serve a customer, I have to go to this screen, and then, here's this Band-Aid that we put on a couple of weeks ago. I got to open up this whole different program to answer that question.
Yeah.
And it's my God, we've got to tackle the technical debt that sits in these organizations, all organizations, before you just like pile something else on to everybody.
And the UX, right? Because, each software company is trying to keep you on their platform as much as they can. And they have APIs and integrations and some things like that. But man, are they kludgy. I had this experience recently. So I work with an agency. They are in the Microsoft suite. And so there were some slides I needed to get while I was on a plane out of Microsoft SharePoint. And I was like, okay, so I go on, I have to use my username from that agency. I log in, and it says you need to use an authenticator app for third-party authentication. The only way I can do that is on my phone, but I'm on a plane and only one of my devices can be connected to the Wi-Fi. So then I have to take my laptop off the Wi-Fi, get my phone onto the Wi-Fi, get the authenticator app, and then log into the SharePoint on my phone, download to my phone. And then I'm like, how do I get the presentation from my phone to my, it was just, and that was in the Microsoft suite.
Yeah.
And it was the most unfriendly, triggering, painful, and I'm on a plane saying, I need to get this presentation to this client tonight. And imagining my plane is landing at midnight. I'm going to have to literally like get home from the airport at 1 a.m, do this, because they don't get that this UX is so unfriendly. How is it possible that a company so massive with so many brilliant people still has such hideous user experience? My thought load was through the roof, both in terms of all of what I had to pay attention to, but how emotionally triggered I felt. By this point, I was angry. I was upset that I wasn't getting this deliverable in a timely way to the client. It was awful. And of course, draining my batteries at a rate.
Yeah. You've got listeners going, been there, done that many times over.
Many times.
Yeah.
Right?
Liane, let's do our mentorship
awful.
moment. I'm going to put a senior leader in front of you right now. And they're concerned that their teams are wearing unnecessary complexity and conflict avoidance as a security blanket. I've seen it happen many times.
Yeah.
Everybody's always whining about how overwhelmed they are. Through the leader's lens, the business is stagnating. Competitors are starting to eat their lunch. What's your advice to this senior leader to help them move forward, get out of their blame mindset? What's the matter with you? You've got yourself wrapped in this blanket of comfort.
Yeah.
What's your advice?
Yeah. So the person who's giving you these excuses is somebody who's got thought load so high that they can't cope with a more accountable answer. So we want to tackle the 3 pieces of thought load. So first, I'm going to tell that leader, what is the single most important outcome you're counting on that person to deliver? And can you articulate that to them? Can you tell them what good looks like? Can you tell them what too good looks like? Because we don't want to overshoot when we have high thought load. Can you get crystal clear? And then can you help them triage all the stuff that's in their work week to get focused, have their back on things where you need to say that can wait, or I'm going to ask somebody else to do that. So that's number 1. You can add huge value. One of the reasons people aren't taking accountability is they don't know what to take accountability for. They're trying to take accountability for too many things and they're burning out. So that's number 1. Number 2, they're having an emotional reaction. And so emotions are part of the human operating system. They're non-negotiable. So don't bother being like, emotions are unprofessional or unproductive. No, they aren't. They're not even optional. But what happens is if we don't learn from the data in our emotions, they turn into stories and feelings that create drama. So the second thing I'm going to tell the leader is create a safe forum to hear about what's going on, the stories that this person is telling themselves. So if that's the outcome, how do you see that playing out? What's the thing you're most worried about in there? What do you see as your role in that, and what help do you need? But give them a place to share what they're experiencing emotionally, and then help them reframe. What if, what about, and then get to an action. So what's one thing you could do that's going to give you some positive momentum in the direction of that outcome? Help them process the emotion rather than invalidating it or getting stuck in it. That's the second thing. And third thing, how do you help them tap into renewable energy sources and use their energy wisely? So probably taking that big outcome and chunking it down into like, what's the one thing? What's the next sprint you could do? And then giving them a chance to rest and reflect and then do another sprint. So chunking up their energy into more bite-sized pieces instead of, I think most employees right now feel like their leaders are asking them to sprint a marathon. They want the sense of urgency and responsiveness of a sprint, but there's never a place where they can turn off, not even on the weekend, not on the evenings. It's just go, 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 go. So the third thing is helping them understand what's a bite-sized, manageable piece of work you want them to go do for a week or for a couple of weeks, and then come back. What did we learn? What reflections do you have? Take a day to, get back on top of your inbox or have the customer calls you need to have, and then let's talk about the next sprint. So those 3 things. So if you've got somebody who's not taking accountability, who's sort of emotional and there's a bit of drama, it's their thought load that's probably the issue. Get them focused on an outcome, help them process those, crazy stories they're telling themselves about, all the things that are under threat, and then give them a sprint and a rest kind of routine where they can make progress and be acknowledged and rewarded for it. That's what I'd tell them.
Awesome. Liane, how can folks get a hold of you? Where can they find your work?
So I was trying to come up with a thing that doesn't add to your thought load to remember how to spell Liane with an I and all those sorts of things. So just thoughtload.com. How's that for
That's great.
an easy place? And of course, if people would like to ask a question or comment on anything that we've talked about, LinkedIn is a great place where we can actually go back and forth. I love those conversations and would love to hear how folks are thinking about these ideas, to hear about what's in their thought load. All of those things are best on LinkedIn. So either thoughtload.com or on LinkedIn.
Great. Some quick lightning round questions to end our show.
Okay.
All right. Liane Davey, you've just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
I'm going to mental health. I'm going to mental health, and if I'm going to spend $1 on mental health, I'm going to spend it helping young people build mental health habits and routines. So my money is going to an organization called Strong Minds, Strong Kids that helps healthy kids build habits to keep themselves mentally healthy for a lifetime. I think that the return on investment of $1 spent there is better than almost anywhere.
Awesome. Now, I give you access to a really small time machine, and you can send a short message to an earlier version of Liane Davey. What's the message, and what previous version do you send it to?
I'm going back to nerdy high school Liane, who it was rough, and I'm gonna tell her that character building is painful in the moment, but it's so worth it in the long term. Stick with it. Stick with it, girl. You got this.
Embrace the nerd. Is that the message?
Oh, well, that's, I used to have a fridge. My husband is also a neuroscientist and a nerd. And we used to have a fridge magnet that said, "Talk nerdy to me."
Nice.
Yes. Embrace the nerd would be a great quote to tell my 16-year-old self.
Great. Liane, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Yeah, well, you can imagine on lowering my thought load. And the irony is not lost on me that when one is running a consulting firm, a global keynote speaker, and launching a book, that keeping my thought load down is, first of all, important, because I don't want to be someone who just talks a good game and doesn't live it, but also incredibly challenging. So each day I have to make a conscious effort to say, what are you focused on now? What are you doing to keep your thought load down? And that's a continual effort. Thankfully, because of what I've learned and the research I've done in writing the book, most days I can ride the wave. Really, it knocks me over and I eat sand face down, face down getting smashed. But today's a good day.
Good. Liane, you were a wonderful guest. I'm sure our listeners got a lot of great information out of this show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I really enjoyed the questions. It was a great conversation.
Excellent. Well, my name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and maybe a neighbor. The show was produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on The Balancing Act.